So we are going to officially get started, and the recording is on. And today's topic is integrating the masculine principle, and I would call that a healthy masculine principle, into our healing work and healing containers, somatic, trauma, experiential work, and how it's so important to really identify a healthy masculine principle, as we see at times an over polarized and sometimes even aggressive masculine principle, and the ways in which it covertly insinuates itself into so many aspects of our life, and the way in which this over polarized masculine principle has shown up across every layer and landscape of our existence, everything from work to the way we perform and produce and attain and excel, the hustle culture, and the ways in which our healing arts have at times been reduced to power yoga, power breath work, power this, power that, the in and out, the quick, fast, aggressive, sometimes overly yang approach. And it's not to say that this yang principle, this masculine principle, doesn't have its place, because it absolutely does. But today we are going to talk about what it looks like to integrate that principle in a healthy and unified way, so it's no longer working out of balance. And so we have some topics we'd like to discuss today and dialogue on. Adelina, did you want to add anything else before we dive in?
Yes, the only other thing that I wanted to talk about is like this bridging the gap as well, amidst and amongst this, like how do we move towards a different direction? And I think I touched upon this earlier as well, of like, okay, so we see all this power yoga and power breath work and in and out trainings over the weekend, even with lots of ceremonial work and plant medicines on the rise right now. And it's like, okay, this is all here. So we're going to talk about what this is unintegrated aspects. And we're also going to bridge into how can we move through and what can we bring forth in terms of changing and making waves and ripples of change out into the world in a more embodied, integrated, anchored, rooted, safe space, while we're integrating our own masculines as well within all of our work and our lives and how we're showing up in the world.
Beautiful. So this is really the perfect segue to our first, let's just call it, principle of an integrated, healthy masculine. And that is what I believe is a deep need within our healing spaces, which within our spiritual, somatic arts, even the world at large. And that is the need for delayed gratification. And when we tune into what is delayed gratification, what does it actually mean in a modern westernized culture? And what that means to me is the art of slowing down, the art of embodying our craft, our work, our codes, the art of allowing ourselves the process of integration, of gestation, of even marinating, right? Marinating in what we're learning. This is why at SBA we have longer trainings, because there's no way to learn the depths of somatic and trauma work in a short period of time. There is an integration piece. And so continuing with that, it's that refinement, it's that crafting, it's really developing what I call experientially based wisdom. And experientially based wisdom only occurs through our lived experience, right? Through our learnings, through our lessons, through our trials, through our mistakes, through our failures. It's so beautiful to fail, because what is failing if not learning, if not information, if not an invitation to refine more deeply the next time and the next time? And so our work initiates us, our work stretches us, it strengthens us, it tries us, it challenges us. And if we aren't allowing that gift of experientially based wisdom, we are robbing ourselves that true process of delayed gratification and refinement refinement, because this is how we actually integrate and embody our codes, not just in how we're teaching or what we're teaching, but how we're showing up in our own life. And this is the deep shadow distortion and so much of this quick pop-up training, right? This overnight certification. I call it the spiritual industrial complex. It's become a capitalistic spirituality, right? Where it's like overnight you're a master, overnight you're a practitioner, overnight you're a leader, overnight you're a coach. And we are not allowing this deep gift of feminine gestation and refinement. And so really looking to, and this is a different answer for each of us, but what is the art of experientially based wisdom within our own lives? How would that look? How would that feel? How would that be? And how can we slow down and really allow ourselves that sensual, devotional, delicious descent and no longer rush, because urgency is a trauma response, right? I always say, where's the fire? Where's the rush? Where's the hurry? What's driving us for that overnight title? You know, if that's how it shows up, it can show up so many ways, right? It can show up as not ever allowing ourselves to humble ourselves enough to be the student. What would it look like to actually be the student? What would it look like to actually receive, to refine, to deepen, and no longer rush with that urgency of the capitalistic approach to what we're learning? And there's a deep beauty and gift of that slowing down and allowing the process to unfold in its own perfection. Adelina, do you want to add onto that?
Yes, I love everything that you're sharing, because it really is this experiential based wisdom that lives within us and moves through us. And a lot of times we're always seeking outside of ourselves, seeking outside of ourselves, seeking outside of ourselves. Sometimes even traveling the globe, traveling across oceans. We're going everywhere, but in here. And why are we doing that? Because going in here is very uncomfortable, and a lot of times the material that is just right around us, our lives, our family dynamics, our friendship dynamics, our community dynamics, there's so much information about what we are experiencing on a daily basis. And so I'm really encouraging from this space of look at your life, like the experiences of your life are incredible portals for teachings and lessons and transmissions, but also reflections. Everything is a reflection of you. So if you really want to get honest about where you're at in your life and who you are, take a look just around your immediate area. A lot of times just like urgency is a trauma response, travel can be a trauma response, because you're running away from yourself because you don't want to face your current reality and your current manifestations and your current reflections. So get really comfortable and get really honest with who you are and who it is that's around you and where it is that you're located and what kind of life you're crafting and curating within your own community right now. Even if you're wanting to manifest something different or manifesting something more, the now that you're in has a lot of information and a lot of lessons for you to be able to graduate and expand into what you want next. So I'm just really feeling that that's also something to weave into this space, that your present reality is filled with lessons as well.
I love that inquiry, Adelina. How, really, how are we showing up right now? And even if we have goals and visions and dreams and aspirations and seeds that we're planting, like you said, your present moment relationship to your environment, to your partnerships, to your friendships, to your community, to your work, to your service at all gives a lot of information. It provides a lot of information. And really, to tune into the core or the crux of that inquiry, it's just a question of what is the predominant energetic that is driving me, and what is the quality of that energetic? So is there this piece of gotta do, right? Gotta show up and do something, gotta do something for my business, gotta post something, have to do the thing because it's all happening around me and all these other people are doing the thing. And like, what is the energy that is driving you? And for me, this was a big one I had to disentangle, particularly for the last 2 years as SBA expanded exploded so exponentially was to look at how I personally was still in an imbalanced masculine. And, as you might even say, like a type of codependency with my business, where I thought if I wasn't always showing up and always doing the things and always tending something and always creating something, then it would all fail and crumble. And this was a deep, deep, deep healing journey for me, and disentangling codependency and disentangling imbalanced masculine, which ultimately at the end of the day was a Western programming, right? It was this program I was running that at the core levels said, if I'm not producing, performing, or achieving, then I am not worthy. I am not enough. I am not whole. And so it was an unraveling of a part of my identity that was entangled with this belief of like always having to be doing something, or I was lazy, unworthy, unproductive, not enough, etc. And really allowing that voice. And if anyone's, in the process of disentangling an imbalanced masculine in their work, in their business, whatever it is, like listening to the voice that immediately shows up the moment you truly slow down. And for me, it was this voice of like, is this okay? Am I allowed to do this? Like, you can just be and bask and receive. And so even though I was doing all of these things before, right, I truly was allowing them, there was still like something in the back of my head where it didn't fully allow me to just die into the void and die into the womb. And so the last 6 months or so has been the deepest, deepest death and rebirth for me, and truly healing that masculine energetic within self to know the value of being, the value of who I am as my worth. And that worth is defined or dictated by no external metric. And so what would it feel like to know our worth resolutely and completely without the identity, without the clients, without the students, without the metrics, without the likes, without the sales? If you had zero down every bracket, would you still know your worth? And that's the question. Or are we defining that worth via external metrics? And the beautiful thing is, the more we redefine this relationship from the inside out, the more we are reflected back the magnitude of what is possible and all we are deserving of. But until we do this, it's always going to be founded on a distorted energetic of external seeking and external validation. So the next is, there's so many good ones. Let's see. So we talked about experientially based wisdom. I wanted to add one little layer of that, and that's really moving out of the imitation, moving out of the copying, moving out of the parroting as parrots do, right? We repeat things back. And sometimes plagiarism, it's happened to me more than I would like to say. There is a lot of plagiarism and imitation out there, and it's not to judge, because sometimes it's not even happening consciously. But the truth of it is, when we fully sink into that unified self, right? The marriage of masculine and feminine, when we sink into who we are, when we sink into our innate worth, when we really open our channel to that divine intelligence which wants to move through us, we find that we are in a full, let me say it another way, we are the most open conduits to the wisdom, to the codes, to the transmissions, to the information that wants to flow through us. But when we're in that imbalanced masculine, when we're in that seeking, when we're in that monkey mind of like, well, I have to think about what my audience wants, or I have to do this thing because this girl's doing it, or this person's successful over here, so let me do this, we're actually marooning ourselves from that innate and inborn wisdom. So to me, really allowing our channel to open is to trust in our medicine, to trust in our message, to trust in our codes, to trust in our own unique soul blueprint and the wisdom that wants to stream through us. And when we are fully in that relationship of trust and knowing, the most inspired genius can flow through us because our channel is clear and we're listening and receiving. But when we get wrapped up in that imbalanced masculine, in our minds, in our thinking, in this comparison or this analyzation of like, putting ourselves against others and like constantly in that comparison culture treadmill that we see all around us, then we actually maroon ourselves from our innate genius. Adelina, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I feel like what you're speaking to is so powerful because it is that masculine monkey mind. It's like, well, okay, well, this person is growing like this and has these kinds of results because of this way that she's doing it, right? Or he's doing it. So if you are really focused on that, then what happens is I really see imitation from the place of like plagiarism. If you're really going to the extreme of imitation, it's coming from what place? Fear, manipulation, control, and it's really coming from wounds of like, well, I have to do it this way, and that way will for sure get me to the success that I want, the money that I want, the life that I want, that I'm seeing other people living. And so plagiarism, I really think, comes from one, this power hungry energy of wanting to get there quicker, and plagiarism and copying people will on some spectrum may appear to get someone there quicker, but it doesn't, right? So there's one aspect, and the second aspect is a deep wound of not having enough self-worth, not believing that the innate wisdom is already within. It just wants to be expressed, but it can't be expressed in any other way than your own expression, and that takes work. That takes the layers that Kaya was talking about, that she's moved through, and she's cleansed and she's cleared and she's really gotten down to the core of who she is. And then her business blew up. Then SBA became this massive, beautiful experience for the world to really visualize and see. And I see this time and time and time again, that when we allow ourselves, and when a lot of my clients allow themselves to go really deep within, when they finally start to see their medicine and then they start sharing from that space, all of a sudden, everything that they've been dreaming, visioning, and hoping for starts to come alive without that copying, without that plagiarism, without that control, without the manipulation. But that is just a fear. It's just an unintegrated aspect of the masculine looking for power rather than the integrated masculine that wants to create change and create impact and create healing and community-based, oriented-based change, and more coming from the heart, where the mind may be facilitating the direction of everything, but everything is so much more heart-based and body-based. So I just wanted to add in that part as well. Like there's wounding behind that, and it takes work. And when I say work, it just takes our presence to these patterns and our willingness to go within ourselves to clear these aspects that have been societally conditioned within ourselves that maybe can put us in that urgency or in that desire or in that energetics that are out of alignment from what we really want. Because a lot of times what we really want and what we're trying to achieve from the mind and from that place of urgency and power, they're completely different actually. So it's really getting clear on where's the heart in all of it, and then how can you allow your medicine to come through and come forth and plug into that heart for the greater service of all, which I'll tap into a little bit later.
Beautiful. Yes. What really, really stands out as you share all of that is just that piece of creating from lack, creating from not enoughness or unworthiness. And just to give a very quick, like real-time example of a healing I had with a woman who, let's just say, like very much plagiarized quite a bit of our website, and then actually funneled it into her breathwork course. And someone that had happened to read all of our website because they applied for our training saw it and sent it to me. Long story short, when I brought it up, at first there was a lot of denial. No, I didn't happen. And then I showed the examples. Okay. After that, it was like undeniable. But what was so beautiful about what came from this, because she was open and willing, was a deep, deep, deep healing. And she was willing to acknowledge and speak to that this was coming from a version of herself that didn't trust it, that didn't feel worthy, that didn't feel enough, that didn't feel like she could create from her inner wisdom and from her codes. And so we are able to have such a beautiful healing through that acknowledgement. And, there was so much like forgiveness and love because I wasn't angry at this person. It was more just wanting the accountability and the acknowledgement of action so we can heal and move into right relationship within this situation. And so from that, acknowledging, wow, like her acknowledging this was a version of self who didn't trust it and didn't feel enough and didn't feel worthy. And then to learn and grow from that experience and to say, I do trust my channel now. I do trust my codes now. I am a conduit from my own wisdom. And the most beautiful thing is, there is no one that is us. So we all have our unique flavor of wisdom and medicine to offer into the world. And when we can really trust in that, trust in who we are unequivocally and boldly and brazenly, we realize that we are the most unique blueprint that there is because no one will ever be us. So how can we really start to hone that and channel that and allow our wisdom to speak and get out of that really imbalanced masculine programming that has us competing and comparing and in the head about it and looking to all the external metrics of validation or obsessed with the algorithms or the time of day to do this or I have to do this. And this is all strategy when if it's not founded in the deeper energetics can actually send us on this tailspin where we're never actually going to create what we desire because we are trapped in the mental hypermasculine realm of success. And it's all about merging the two energetics to actually create union. And both balance, masculine and feminine, have a place. And it's our role to actually unify them together so they're working in cohesion and we're not polarized and overly polarized into one or the other. All right. So the next is impeccability with words, actions, and intentions. And this to me is like really more of the union of both because to me, the feminine is about tuning into, and this is some really fun work we just did in my leadership container that I'm running. We tuned into some of these questions, and this was, what is my highest message? My highest dharma and blueprint in service work? What is, can you describe the quality and the textures and the energies of the soul of your brand? So if your brand were its own entity, if your brand has its own soul, which I believe it does, how would that brand be and speak and live and show up? And some deeper inquiries are like, who is my soulmate audience? Who are my soulmate clients? Who are my soulmate students? And really getting out of this metric of I have to think about what my potential audience wants and speak to that. That's actually all backwards. It's about tuning into what is the highest expression of my dharma, of my passion, of my gifts, of my service, and what would it look like to embody that on the deepest levels, and then what would be the quality of audience or client base that would align to this. And so when we really feel into that, we speak, we live, we give our message, we act, we show up in impeccability. And impeccability doesn't mean to be perfect. It just means to be in right action or right relationship. It doesn't mean we can't make mistakes. It doesn't mean we can't apologize for errors or learn a lesson or fail or be initiated through something really intense. We're not always going to show up in the way we want to, but it's a deeper striving to live by right action. And so a question I always ask is, who are you being, right? Not what are you doing? Not what are you saying? Not how you're performing or how you are revealing yourself in the limelight or on the screen or into your audience, but who are you being? Who are you is another way to say it on the deepest levels. How are you showing up in your intimate most relationships, off the screen, behind closed doors, out of the spotlight, out of the center? And how are you showing up within your own self dialogue? How are you speaking to yourself? How are you relating to yourself? And are you living the words you speak, right? So is there a disparity or a gap between what you're saying and how you're actually showing up behind closed doors? Or are you striving to live your medicine as much as possible? And we won't always get it right, but it's a striving. It's a striving to live your words, to be that living emanation of your message in real time, so there's no longer a gap between what we say and who we be. I know that sounds grammatically funny, but who we are, who we be, how we're showing up on the deeper levels of our lived experience. And this creates an energetic transmission of trust, right? When we get out of that masculine mind and we come into the body, into feeling, into sensation, into inner wisdom and innate knowing, we start to speak from that place and we bridge the gap. So there's no more a disparity with what we are saying and how we are showing up. And I believe it's the imbalanced masculine that keeps us in the mind or in these unrealistic standards of perfection. Like you have to have all the answers all the time, or you have to be the one who knows, or you can't reveal your flaws, you can't reveal your struggles, you can't reveal your humanity. And all of that is false, because the deepest trust lives when we can actually reveal all parts of our experience, not just what is pretty, pleasant, or curated, but the parts that make us human, the parts that make us beautifully imperfect, and the parts that show that we're all on this growth together. We're all learning and growing together. And how can we come back into right relationship and impeccability with our words, with our choices, with our actions, and how we are actually showing up in real time? Adelina.
And yes, all of that. I actually wrote down earlier today that like that gap that you speak to between who you're appearing to be and who you really are behind the closed doors, behind the screens. And it's really easy with social media to put facade out and to even compare our facade to another facade, because there's a lot of facade on social media, and a lot of times I see people comparing themselves to others, and I'm like, that a lot of times is a facade that's even being presented. So it's really important to get clear on who you are being. And of course, we all have the unintegrated aspects of ourselves, like Kaya was saying, and the moments of non-regulated nervous system and moments where we project and the places where we try to control, and we all have reactions, and it's inevitable because we're human. But are we willing to share about our human experiences on our social media platforms? Are we willing to share about our human experiences with our communities and our friends? Are we willing to lead and to teach just as much as we're willing to learn and to be a student? And I think that this is really important to continue to check in with yourself. It's an everyday check-in. And since I've become a mother, it's like every second check-in of who am I being, because she's learning. She's learning by transmission. Her subconscious is literally absorbing. And so I've been in this question of absorption, of really looking at like who I'm being, because she's not learning by any other way other than observing, watching me, witnessing me 24 hours a day of how I'm interacting with my spouse, how I'm interacting with myself, what kind of tones I'm using, what kind of frequencies I'm emitting, how quickly do I move through my anxiety and my fear, how much am I trying to control, manipulate her because I want something different, and how often am I willing to be listening, and how often am I willing to be patient, and how often am I not? You think you're all these things, and then when you have someone in your field 24 hours a day, that's little, you really get tested. And it has shown me so much about who I'm being, and really has allowed me to be humble and to allow my ego to just be cut up, chewed out, spit out, and get really honest with who am I being all day long. And would I want my daughter to think like that? Would I want my daughter to act like that? Would I want my daughter to use that tone or frequency? Would I want her to react like that? Like all of these kinds of things. So it might even be helpful of like, if your inner child, if you don't have children, if your inner child was watching you all day long, like how would you want her to really see you? And how would you want her to learn from you? And how would you want her to, like, what would you want her to absorb? Because it's really about absorption. If we look at everything from like more of a quantum field, an energetic field, how we are being is what ripples out, and that also is what manifest. That is reflective of what we're manifesting in our lives. So getting really honest about how long are you staying in the aspects of you that, like Kaya said, that we're human and we make mistakes, but it's how are we moving through those aspects of mistakes? How are we transmuting them? How are we showing up to them? How are we showing up for others? How are we communicating our forgivenesses and our apologies? How are we really being as a human in this experience of life? And how are we energetically, kind of energy are we putting out into our field? Especially towards those that we have hard relationships with, because I truly believe that those are just there to help us grow, and they're there to help us learn, and they're there to, as teachers, like Spirit has specifically put certain people in our lives to test, to see how are you going to show up now. Certain circumstances, certain experiences, massive life changes. You get really sick. There's many things that happen in our lives that we could not have even planned for, but Spirit knows that we needed them sometimes to humble us and completely shatter our ego. But the reason for that is to see how we're going to show up. Because we say we're these spiritual beings on this planet, walking in these conscious ways, but how conscious can we be when everything isn't perfect? And then how can we share that? That's another aspect that I want to encourage. In my postpartum period, there was aspects of it that were not easy. And I've gotten really honest with it on social media around the portals that I entered that were really dark. And it's incredible how many women, so many women, more women than any other time of my life, 11 years of supporting people, more people have been reaching out to me in the vulnerability of sharing the hardships of my life and the dark areas of my life and the shadows of my life, and being really honest about my own personal struggles and my journeys within those struggles and how I've overcome them than any other time of my life. And it's that honesty. It's that full honesty, vulnerability, and presence to life that has actually attracted the most amount of women into my field. So I share that little personal story of don't be afraid to share what you're going through as you're going through it, because I guarantee there are so many others that are waiting for the permission to not have to have this curated, perfected aspect of themselves out in the public. And every time that we do this, we're actually encouraging others to show themselves, to show all of who they are, and that all of who they are and all of what they're going through is medicine for the world. So I encourage that because it gives permission as well.
I love all of that. Yes. Just a couple quick comments I wanted to add that came through while you were talking. And the first is to recap something you said, and that is the energetics we are creating from. So if I could bring that into a recap, who we are being is the energy we are creating from. Not what we are saying, not always how we are acting or what our intentions are, but who we are actually being. So again, who we are being creates. And that is our baseline energetic, right? That we are creating from. The next is you always have the power to start over. None of us are perfect. And we are not coming on here to say we have to be perfect and impeccable all the time. But again, how can we, as needed, start over, right? When I show up imperfectly in my most triggering dynamic, which is my relationship, our intimate relationships and partnerships can be the most triggering dynamics that we have the ability to experience in this life and learn from and grow from and evolve from. And when I show up imperfectly from that place of trigger or from that place of contraction, the most beautiful practice that I am embodying, especially this year as I make this commitment to refine my language and consciously architect my language all the time and learn what the words actually mean, spelling, the act of creating and casting spells with our words. Whole other talk. Actually, we have that in the recording library with Anya, if you want to go into that. But the beautiful thing is that we have the power to start again, to start anew. And so something that I've been practicing in those moments of trigger or contraction when I speak not from my highest is, hold on, I'd like to start over. I'd like to start again. I'd like to begin anew, and I'd like to say that better. And I'd like to say it from a more resource and empowered place rather than a triggered or dysregulated or contracted place. And it's so beautiful. And we can own and acknowledge when we're speaking out of that trigger or out of dysregulation because our nervous system doesn't feel safe in the moment. And then we can begin anew. So knowing we all have the power and capacity to start over with any way we're engaging anyone in our lives, any way we're showing up. Some of the people I respect the most in a lot of like the coaching and wellness and healing industries have come out and publicly spoken to when they were playing something out that wasn't in integrity. There's this one particular sister that wrote this whole post a few weeks ago about how she was playing out a corrupted program or template in her coaching that wasn't in integrity. And she wanted to announce to her audience, this is the rebirth of myself. This is my born again, in a sense, self who is now operating from a deeper degree of integrity. And I'm not saying you have to publicly announce every part of your process. This was specific to her, but I am saying you always have the power to begin again and to start over and to not fester in the ways that we're not acting or operating in our highest. And it's a beautiful thing because we move through things more quickly and more quickly and more quickly, and they don't stagnate and fester in the same way. And then the last piece is one of my favorite quotes is, adversity does not build character, it reveals character. So I often say to get a deep, deep window into who we are being when it's not easy, because we can all find peace on the meditation pillow or the breathwork mat or in our practice, but can we actually find stability and rootedness in conflict, in trigger, in challenge, in dysregulation? Can we still come back to ourselves and find that ground in those places? Because these are what challenge and initiate and expand us. So how are we showing up in conflict and trigger and contraction in a way that really honors our inner message and our inner medicine, right? So are we living our words where it matters, where it counts, not just where it's easy and convenient, right? This is something we learn in my current leadership container. We spent a whole month going into this, right? Leading is not about leading where it's convenient. Anyone can lead where it's convenient or easy, right? That's simple. Leading is about showing up in the places that are deeply uncomfortable, that are challenging, that are inconvenient, and really tuning into how am I living and leading through example there and there and there when it's actually really difficult. How am I showing up? How am I living my words? And really just beginning to tune into where you feel you're embodying your message and your medicine and where you may be not embodying it, and start to take that inventory of each area and manifestation in your life. All right. So the next thing I want to move into is the importance of balancing the principles and really restoring the feminine principle, restoring ancient feminine wisdom in our healing spaces and in our healing containers, specifically in any kind of deeper work, trauma work, subconscious work, experiential work, where it really matters. And since a lot of you are in our breathwork training, some of you are in our leadership training as well, but we'll just stay with the theme of breathwork. The biggest piece in the breathwork world I see this manifest is in, let's just call it the power breathwork, right? This very quick, sometimes aggressive, very yang, sometimes rush, this in and out approach to you drop in, you blast off, zero or very little integration, and then you're on your way. right? And this doesn't have to be just likened to breathwork. We see this in so many practices. We see this in yoga. We see this in healing work. We see this in a lot of subconscious work out there where it's just this quick drop in and then you're on your way. And we actually don't see that gift of integration and that gift of the feminine descent, which is more spacious, right? Which is more intuitive, which is more elongated, which really allows us that journey of death and rebirth. Even if we were to look to the yogic industry, a true shavasana was intended to be as long as the asana itself. So if you had 1 hour of asana, of yoga practice, yoga flow, the shavasana was intended to be another hour equal to the practice. What do we see now? We're lucky if we get what, 5 minutes? 7 minutes, one song, and that's it. And then people are just popping up and on their way. And the same with breath work. I have unfortunately seen so much of this 20, 30-minute breath work where people are dropped in, taken to the depths, have very little time to experience or emote or express what's arising, being immediately pulled out, usually no integration, and then sit on their way to drive a car when they're still very loopy and discombobulated. And these metaphors of just these two examples can be used for so much of the approach that we take to experiential work, to work where we're descending into our being. Where is that deeper integration? Where is that feminine principle? And why has our culture become so overly yang, right? Overly in and out, overly quick, and almost like that get it done, get her done philosophy that we see from maybe the baby boomer era that's bled into so much of our culture. And so this applies to everything. In any ways we're rushing, in any ways we're forcing, in any ways we're pushing past what's available to our body, to our nervous system, to our being. In what ways are we forcing something that's not true to our process? And in what ways can we go deeper? Can we unwind? Can we soften? Can we gestate? Can we create more space, more beingness? The art of being. Something I love to say is that we're not called human doings. We're called human beings, but we treat ourselves so often as human doings. And so the question to really invite into the space is within your process, as well as those experiential containers that you may be participating in or offering, depending on what work you're offering currently, is there any imbalance of the masculine where the spaciousness of the feminine is not fully being honored? And what would it feel like to invite back in that feminine wisdom and dimension into all parts of our experience, both in healing containers and in our own lives and our own world? Because when we go into those deeper depths of our being in a way that's rushed or forced or aggressive, as we've all hopefully learned in the training, this actually has the capacity to further dysregulate, to further traumatize, to further signal non-safety into the body. And then suddenly we're marooning and overriding that somatic body wisdom, and we're not listening. And this can be a subtle form of self-betrayal and self-abandonment where we're pushing past what's available. And there's so many ways to reattune to that inner knowing of what's correct and aligned and coherent for your body, and it differs for everyone. But something I like to invite in is the question of, is this a true yes? Or is this actually a no? And really listen to that inner compass of knowing, because your body will guide you in each moment and what is correct for you, where we're not dishonoring its subtle signals and overriding our nervous system. And, coming back into more ceremony in our healing spaces, more intentionality, more spaciousness, more of that feminine quality allows us to transmute this within our containers so that we're creating more space for that experiential healing and recalibration, and not just rushing or forcing or pushing past. And so many people in our culture are traumatized and dysregulated to the point where they can't even hear what their body is saying. They can't even hear their nervous system. They're being fueled by trauma, and that trauma response becomes the baseline. There is this interesting story of a gymnast. I forget her name, but she was doing these insane acts, right, of gymnastics, like world record Olympian medal holder, like just her body was doing insane things. And when she started doing the healing work and began to get in touch with what was actually running her, it was deeply rooted trauma, particularly sexual trauma. And she was so out of relationship with her body that she couldn't hear any of its messages. And the moment she did that work and started listening, she could no longer perform in the same way, because that performance wasn't actually her truth. It was a trauma response of overriding her body and pushing it too far. And she was finally in a place after going within to listen and to hear. So in order to listen and to hear, we have to reacquaint ourselves, as we all know, with that feminine quality and really come back into that inner listening and inner relationship so we can marry and merge both principles, because the masculine has its place. But when we're over polarized, we can no longer hear the needs of the feminine. Adelina.
Now, this morning, thank you. That was like full power. This morning, Amara had gotten into, which is my daughter, she had gotten into some cards, and they were just on the ground. And when I came back in right before this call, I looked down and I was like, how interesting. I was like, she like pulled the cards, I think, for this session today. And the reason I say that is because the cards, and I feel like now's the perfect time to bring it in, is this card. It was all the shadow cards of this deck, all of them, and this death card as well. And I just feel like we're in this place where the shadows of the masculine, the ways in which we go into overdrive, the ways in which we push ourselves, the way in which the masculine, the unintegrated masculine, like Kaya just said, I love that story you just shared of that gymnast, because a lot of us are in those over masculized places within ourselves because of trauma, whether it's sexual trauma or mental trauma or emotional trauma or ancestral trauma that we've inherited, or societal trauma that is being pushed into ourselves and into our nervous systems. We carry that. And we have been carrying that, and we've been carrying it in our wombs, right? And we've been carrying it in our hearts. We've been carrying it in our bodies, and we're really in this space of unwinding ourselves, and it doesn't always feel safe, that unwinding process. And that's why we can't do it all at one time. That's why these pop-up retreats and these quick like power yogas and power this and like 3-day trainings, and you're doing that. The reason for that, I believe, on a deep cellular level, is because it feels really unsafe to unravel and unwind and to be in those feminine places of being and allowing for that liminal space in between things and allowing for integration time. It's scary sometimes to be in those spaces. And so we want everything to be quick. Because even when we're in spiritual settings, it's like, okay, how quickly can we make this happen? Because I don't really want to unravel all the way. I don't really want to unwind all the way, because what's going to happen? What's going to come up? What's packed in there? I don't know if I really am ready to take that all out. And then we have these super cathartic spaces where it unpacks all of it at one time, and then we can't handle that either. And so I see these extreme situations where it's powering through in spiritual spaces, and then it's also like, let's dig it all out all at one time. Both of these energies are masculine, very unintegrated masculine energies, rather than allowing, unwinding, unraveling, and integrating and allowing and being. It's like you wouldn't stick your hand into a flower that's trying to bud and be like, open now, right? And you wouldn't tell a baby that's in the process of gestation, okay, come on, you got to come out at like 6 months instead of 9 months. Like you would never do that. Like it needs time to integrate. It needs space to integrate. And I work a lot in the plant medicine world, so I see so much this lack of integration and this drinking medicine over and over and over and over and over. I've been on this path for a very, very, very long time, and I've been on a very long break, and it's been essential. been so essential to integrate and unravel myself and to move through the layers of shadow, because the layers of shadow, it's not just one layer. It's not just two, it's not three, it's not four, it's definitely not five. There's way more layers, and they all compile, and it's ancestral as well. So I feel like we get to meet these aspects of our shadow, and we get to meet the unintegrated aspects of the masculine that are within us, but we don't have to force it. We don't have to rush it. And we don't have to do it all at the same time. We don't have to do it all at once. And we get to allow ourselves to go, this Two of Pentacles, like going in and out, like doing a little work, coming back, doing a little work, coming back. Like we get to do this in a way where it gets to be joyful, and it gets to be spacious, and it gets to be fun, and there's a lot of nature. And I was writing on my notes this morning around, like, we get to sing along this, we get to dance along this, we get to make love along this journey, we get to have fun with our friends along this journey, we get to travel the world if we want along this journey. We can do this in a way that has a more feminine approach, a more ceremonial approach, where everything that we're clearing, cleansing, and healing, why are we not making space for it? We get to do this, make offerings for every layer that we move through. We get to take time with every layer. We get to honor the death process. I feel like this is a multifaceted card, like the death of this extreme masculine in our field, but also we get to honor every death experience that we have in our life, every death that we have along our healing journey. We'll have so many of these death-like experiences, but then the beauty of it is that we have new opportunities, new beginnings, new direction that meets that space where we're rebirthing just as much as we're dying. And it's a very feminine process. If we think about just the feminine aspect of the tides and the moons and the blood cycle, every single month there's a death and a rebirth. Like, there's a natural order to the feminine life. There's a natural death. I'm thinking of like the lands in Peru. There's so much land in the Peru, especially up in the mountains, where there's the cycles, and they lived with these cycles around the planting of seeds and the seasons of different plants, and then allowing that land to take a rest and using a different part of the land to plant seeds, and letting that land integrate for a year or two before going back and planting new seeds in that field. And then plants can grow again, and they have a whole system. They have an entire system, and they've really mastered this system. So why would we not allow ourselves to have this planting of seeds and allowing things to blossom, and then allowing things to die, and then allowing it time to integrate, and then planting the seeds again, and making it all very ceremonial all along the way, and allowing it to be joyful all along the way.
Yes, yes. And what I'm hearing in all of this, and this is something I speak to quite a bit as well, and to kind of recap everything you shared, is the importance of honoring the cyclical nature of ourselves and of the world around us. And this is what it means to get out of that overpolarized masculine and to come back to our cyclical nature. The issue that we see is that we are in a social media and visual culture that is showcasing a very incorrect picture of what it means to be a human in their work. And we see a social media culture that is perpetually showing people in constant summer and spring, right? In constant birth, in constant creation. And often it's not even true. It's the illusion of constant summer and constant spring. So what I hear is a return to that sacred death archetype. Death is so important. Coming back to the void, coming back to the womb, dying into versions of self that are no longer true, and allowing ourselves to be reborn and metamorphosized into something new. And we are in a culture that doesn't honor death. It doesn't honor dissolution or destruction or unbecoming. But as we all know, death and life are sacred counterparts. They are two sides or two components of the whole. There is no creation of anything new without destruction of the old. In our dissolution, we become. In our death, we birth new life. In our shedding and our dying, we step into a richer, truer, fuller version of self, but we cannot get there without honoring the death cycles. So to come back into this balance is to get out of that idea and illusion of perpetual summer and spring, and to allow ourselves to be cyclical beings that work with not only external seasons, but our internal seasons. For example, I was in a huge death portal and void all through the summer. My external season was summer, but I was in a deep internal winter. And so our internal states also don't have to match or mirror the external seasons either. Our internal states have to do with being true to our process. If you are in a stagnation, if you feel like everything around you is crumbling or not working or not flowing, usually that's a signal to go within and go to that inner cave or womb or void and die internally and metaphorically, to then rebirth into something new. And there is a power and a gift in the void, but our culture fears the darkness. Our culture fears the void. Our culture fears death, but it is critical to our evolution. And so to be cyclical beings is to honor all inner seasons in all parts of our process. We don't always have to be creating. We don't always have to be birthing something. In fact, it is critical to take space for rest and internal death so that we can actually rebirth into new life. And so that's really important. The last piece is humbling ourselves to be in integrity with how we're showing up in our work and our learnings and our crafts and our trainings, and to really allow ourselves the gift of embodiment and refinement, so we're not prematurely in places that we're not actually holding or embodying in self. And I promise if we do this, the work will land more deeply, it will resonate more fully, and people will trust you in such a greater way because they feel it, because your words become transmissions, they become emanations that are activating people on all levels of their being, not just through the mind. And so how can we really embody through the feminine our gifts, our codes? And it doesn't mean we have to be masters before we can teach, that's not what I'm saying, but that we are committed to this journey of embodiment and refinement and assimilation of our work, and we're not presenting ourselves as further along than we are, but we're being true to where we are in our process, and we're revealing all parts of our experience, not just those curated ones. And people will trust you so much more deeply when you reveal your humanity. This is what I have learned over and over and over and over. When you reveal all parts, the wins, the breakthroughs, the failures, the learnings, the initiations, the lessons, the humblings, the deaths, the life, the rebirth, the ahas, the joys, the beauty, all the things. When you can reveal all of it, you're revealing that full picture of self, and you're no longer in this sliver of this curation of this mental idea of who you think you need to be to attract the thing, to achieve the work that's all happening on the external. None of that is real. So how can we come back into the truth of who we are? How can we self-source our worth? How can we live our truth, our medicine, our codes, our work in all areas of our life? And how can we speak from our knowing and be that clear channel for the wisdom that innately wants to flow through us when we get out of our own way, when we get out of that overly mental masculine and we come back into the wisdom of the body and the breath and the heart and the soul's landscape, and to let that speak through. So to sum all of this up, I just want to have us kind of briefly go over what a healthy integrated masculine looks like, because both principles, masculine and feminine, are required and are necessary. And we can't just live in the feminine either, because how many of you have experienced and self or others, people so in the feminine that nothing ever happens? There's no inspired action, right? Yeah, lots of ideas, but we're just kind of floating in this sea of like oh, these ideas, and then nothing's happening. Okay. So that's also an overpolarization into the feminine. And so to bridge them and merge them and unify them and marry them is to balance both to create that cohesion or coherence. So what does an integrated masculine look like? It looks like a way to be in inspired action and will and devotion and consistency and follow through when it matters. So when you're in that spring, when you're in that summer, when you're in a place of birthing and creating and ideas are coming in, is to actually follow through on the thing, because so many people talk about their dreams and ideas and they sit on them and they sit on them and they sit on them. And it's also healing the inner critic, the saboteur, imposter syndrome, the perfectionist, all the ways where we feel like it's not time for our idea. So kind of the other side of like perpetually doing is sitting on things so long that they lose their momentum, they lose their eros, they lose their passion, they lose their brilliance because they're just sitting. Yeah. So it's inviting inspired action and devotion and consistency and will and follow through when the energy's hot. Yeah. When the idea is here, when you feel like it's time, it's ready to come through, that's when we invite in the masculine. But we also don't want to act just because of force, right? So the way I explain it is when you feel like something is brimming and inspired and exciting and wanting to come through, how can you invite in that balanced masculine to follow through, to create, to invoke your will and your passion and your drive to actually show up and do the tangible action that may be required to bring it into being. And so the feminine is the feeling, is the sensation, is the intuition, is the listening, is the getting clear on the idea that wants to birth through and allowing it to come through the body and the channels. And then the masculine is the will of the action. It's the devotion, it's the follow through. And so how can they work together where we're not so far in our feminine or so far in our masculine? Because examples of people creating from masculine are almost like this robotic, mechanistic, like I'm just going to post every day. I'm going to do this thing every day. I'm going to hyper check my emails. I'm going to like follow up. I'm going to chase people. I'm going to be like super like crazed. Yeah, about how you're running your business or how you're showing up with your clients. And there's not a deeper listening, right? It's mechanistic, it's almost robotic. So that is how we don't want our action to be. We want our action to be married with the feminine. So we're listening, we're feeling, we're acting on the inspiration, and then we're following through. The masculine also creates structure. It can create the container. It can create the foundation. We do have to build a foundation. We need the masculine to build a foundation of anything, our work, our business, our offering, anything that we're doing. We need that foundation, because if we have a wobbly foundation, what happens when we weather a storm? That foundation may collapse. So we require the masculine through the building, through the architecting, through the construction, through the weaving. Let's say it's a business, the weaving of our structure, of our entity. And then the feminine is everything that can live amidst that foundation, right? The listening, the intuition, the spaciousness, the receiving, the magnetizing, the allowing, the attraction of wealth and abundance through that frequency of her openness, of her joy, of her pleasure, of her intuitive stirrings where she's in that creative cauldron of what wants to birth through. So how can we allow them to work together so we're no longer in this distortion or imbalance on either side? And how can we create spaces for more deep listening in our lives and our practice and our work and our clients and our communities, so we can actually hear that inner wisdom and that inner stirring that then wants to be translated into tangible action. So they work together. It's a dance. They're dancing together, and we want to allow them to create that harmony rather than create friction or resistance. Okay, before we move to Adelina, I just want to address Colby's question, because this is a really good one, and I've actually had the same experience in my work. So Colby asks, what do you do when there's so much inspiration that you feel like you're drowning in it? Yes, I can be like this as well. It feels like it's all at once, and then there's a struggle to follow through because there's so many ideas, you get lost in the inspiration. Yes, absolutely. Slow down and be patient. That is my exact piece I was going to offer, because I've had these moments where it's almost like the opposite of creative blocks or writer's blocks. It's like creative overflow. We're getting so many ideas and they're all coming in, and you're like, how do I even act on all these ideas? There's so much. I feel like I'm in a soup of creative visions and I don't even know how to navigate that. This was also me. And I had a belief that I had to just do everything now. I had to birth everything now. I had to launch everything now. I would be like type A and in this like craze of like perpetual birthing. And sometimes it served and often it didn't. And so what I've learned through this is the art of timing. Because just because we're getting the idea doesn't mean we have to act on it now. It doesn't mean we have to launch it now. It doesn't mean we have to create it now. So what I really love to do is just write down like loose templates, right? Maybe it's an idea for a course or for an offering or for a live or a master class. I'll just write down the name and maybe like a blurb about what it is, and I'll just let it sit in my Canva, or I'll let it sit in my notes, or I'll let it sit in my digital cauldron as something to simmer and potentially come back to. So there's something, for example, I've been sitting on since February. I would love to have launched it this year, but it's not the timing. And so we're waiting until January of next year because it revealed to me that it just wants to simmer and marinate and really be cultivated. And so when we can just get the loose idea down and not act on it, and even a visual let's say you have like 10 ideas and you can create like a visual representation of all of them. Maybe it's just like a graphic in Canva with the name of something and a little blurb. And then you can actually go into it like a mood board and tune into all of these floating ideas and their images and just feel into the timing and feel into the resonance and really let them sit. So we're not just like acting on them instantly, which is actually, coming from urgency often, unless you're really feeling it. And then also a calendar, right? A calendar of planning, like when this wants to be launched, when this wants to take place. I've started doing this and booking things like 4 to 6 months out. And you could actually say, okay, this month feels juicy for this because it ties in maybe with the season, or maybe with something that's happening that month, or maybe just with your personal flow. So then you can actually just start planning them out over time, or just let them sit and simmer until they want to come through. So there's a way to get it down without acting on it, and then coming back later through the art of timing and the art of patience and slowing down and allowing and letting them reveal to you when they want to be executed or created. All right, Adelina, do you want to add any last little nuggets of what a healthy integrated masculine looks like before we close? You are muted, I think.
There we go. I love that question, Colby, as well, because it is a really powerful thing when all these ideas and everything is coming through for you. And everything that Kaya said is on point in terms of preparing and planning and allowing. And I've actually been in this cauldron as well of like allowing things to be mapped out. I have like my whole next year mapped out, and I've never really lived like this so much. But with a child, it changes everything. And it's been so nourishing for my nervous system to know where I'm going, even if it's a loose, tentative plan, or even some of it's anchored, some of it has options for other things to come in. Like I never schedule anything to where there isn't room or space for creativity and just like the beauty of a goddess coming through whenever it wants to happen. But having that structure is so nice. It's like, oh, I get to relax I get to restore, I get to rejuvenate. I don't have to pile everything on top of another. Everything has a space. When everything has a space, that means all the energy can move into that space, which means that that thing can flourish fully because my attention, my presence, my awareness, my love is in that, is with that. And I think that that is literally the encapsulation of the divine masculine and of like an integrated masculine is full presence, full awareness, patience, a really integrated, embodied masculine. If you've seen them within you or outside of you, there's no rush. It's very calm. It's very anchored. It's very rooted. It's very grounded. You automatically feel around that presence a sense of like, I can relax in my body. I can relax in my being. I can relax in my heart because there is such security in the sense of consistency and devotion and patience. And like, there's a real oomph to it. There's like I am here. I am grounded. I'm not moving. I'm not budging. I'm also not changing my mind a million times. I am centered. I'm clear. I'm focused. And that energy moves mountains. Like that is when you take inspiration and creative energy and you move it into that energy, everything starts to open, everything starts to awaken, everything starts to blossom because there's clarity, there's focus, there's presence, there's anchoredness, there's groundedness. There's not wishy-washy energy. There's not kind of in, kind of out. It's fully there. And I keep hearing this word devotion come through, which a lot of times will connect into the feminine of like being so devotional and spiritual and ceremonial. But the masculine is actually very devoted. It's just our society has looked at the masculine being disciplined and consistent and structured and like boom, 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 boom. But I think it's actually this like full devotion to that presence and to that organization and to that structure. So when you feel like you're all over the place a little bit, just allowing yourself to tap into practices that will help you get anchored, grounded, rooted, centered, clear, focused, present, all these very beautiful embodied masculine words. Once you allow yourself to go into practices like that, you will find that your inspiration will start to take form and you'll naturally start to put structure around it. Maybe your life, if it's all over the place and you start to bring in some of those more masculine practices, like meditation is a great one where you just sit and be and allow all of your attention and presence and awareness to be right then and there. Everything stops circling and things start to come into this beautiful center point. So allowing the spaces as well for that center point, allowing the spaces for your masculine to thrive and to allow, like really celebrating the masculine, like celebrating your masculine as you continue to evolve it, as you continue to integrate it, and as you continue to embody it in a way that's more in alignment. It's more in alignment. So those are the ways that I experience the masculine within myself and other embodied masculine, and just the ways that I've learned to integrate it again and again and again. So that's what I feel called to share.
Beautiful. Love that. Yes, I really, really felt that quality of patience and grounded in a grounded, patient way where we're acting through knowing or gnosis. It's like this internal knowing of when it's time to act, but that only comes through the feminine listening. So I see them in this beautiful marriage or dance or union where they're working in that harmony and coherence, and they actually require each other, right? Each part requires the other to function. And so I see this beautiful rebalancing when we can act from intuitive listening and that inner knowing. There's a divine timing of we find ourselves in the right place at the right time, and I'm getting chills. So that's a yes. The truth bumps, but it's like this beautiful knowing of divine timing, and we know exactly how to act. And it's not coming from fear or urgency or trauma or mental ideas of how we think we should be acting, but it's coming from that deep embodied knowing of alignment and the inspiration of birthing that inner vision into the tangibility of form. So I see the feminine birthing through the idea, and then the masculine taking that dream seed or that nugget and tangibilizing it, making it tangible and manifest into form. So it's this beautiful harmony that they're creating together. Amazing. So we are going to close. I would love to just tune in. Was there any takeaway? Was there something that landed with you for your own process? Was there something that stood out? Or any like very quick question we could answer or speak to in the next 5 minutes here? So feel free to share maybe an insight or an aha, a breakthrough, something that inspired you. Anyways, also that you're wanting to integrate either principle more deeply and more harmoniously. Yes, so Yvette writes, voicing, then parking the idea or inspiration and letting it marinate. Absolutely. That's been so huge. And I really find it creates more power and depth to our ideas, because when we just bring that dream seed, right? That initial vision into the mind's eye or into just like a loose visual, it can sit, right? But not in a bad way. Like it can sit in this way of generating momentum and power and depth, because we're like tending to it more in dream time, more through vision, more through third eye realms, right? So it hasn't quite come to be, but it can generate power. So so as long as it's not like collecting dust and we never think about it again, but if something can just sit and create that depth, it actually amplifies, and there's this momentum that's happening more in the dream time realms or the imaginal realms before it's birthed into form. And I actually find we can like tend it that way before it's ready to come through. For example, the thing that's been in my cauldron for the last like 9 months or so, I feel the momentum and depth that it's generating. And it's actually changed quite a bit since the initial vision, because what's happening is we're sitting with it more, right? And when we sit with it more, it might refine the message or refine the vision or refine the teachings. And we can refine it even before it's launched or even before it's birthed through within the imaginal realm. Okay, so also, Mariana, the confirmation that I don't have to do all the things right now just because others are doing them. Beautiful. Yes, you're at your own perfect pace, timing, and unfoldment, and you can trust in your own timing. Digital cauldron, divine timing, parking loose ideas, feminine birthing, masculine taking seed into growth. Beautiful, Helen. I love that. Amazing. So, as we close, I just want to give a final invitation into the space on how we can actually create even more harmony within those inner principles. So, that could be, is there a feminine vision that's been sitting and sitting and sitting, and it's maybe asking for some devotion, some will, some inspired action? Are there actionable steps you can take right now, even just as the next leg of its creation? And maybe even doing some vision mapping or timeline, or just putting some energy and effort into it. Or on the other side, are there ways in which you've been in urgency? Maybe you've been in a hurry. Maybe you've been acting out of the mental impulses of, I got to do the thing because they're doing the thing and I got to make the thing and the external metrics and la, 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 all of that stuff, right? All of that mental churning, the monkey mind musings that is driving you to act in a way that's actually not in true alignment with your desire. And maybe that urgency is actually creating in a way that's not true for you, because urgency creates with a really fractured energy. It's scattered, it's fractured, it's all over the place, and people feel when it's not in alignment, right? They feel when we're seeking or chasing or doing something that's not actually true, and it turns people off, believe it or not. They can feel it. I can feel when someone's seeking or chasing me because I expressed some interest in something, and now I feel like I'm being chased through sales calls or chased through messages, or like perpetually, like I can just feel this grasping or grabbing energy, right? Where we're seeking or we're searching for something based on the external rather than sourcing internally and then creating from our overflow, creating from our divine inspiration. So are there any ways in which you're maybe in that overpolarized masculine with your work, with yourself, with your life, with your relationship, and it's not serving? And what would it feel like to come back into more spaciousness and ease and allowance and gestation? Or any other ways that you feel you can further balance those qualities in yourself to create more coherence? So the last piece Colby wrote, yes, consistent devotion to the inspiration that is asking for a longer unfoldment. Yes, divine timing and the perfection of your unique unfoldment that is true to you and your inner seasons and rhythms, and the execution of your vision, which only you can truly know through the act of deep listening. Love the concept of saying, hold on, I'd like to start over from a resource space. Yes, that's a big one. Yes, yes, yes. And letting there be rest in the cycles of a life. Absolutely. Honoring our cyclical nature and knowing when to allow that inner winter and death and let that be okay, right? And let that be a part of your process. And the last little image I'd like to leave before we close is imagine like a large, like flowering bush or shrub in nature. And if you would look to like every little flower in that larger organism of the shrub or the bush, you would find that each flower would be in a different stage of bloom. Some flowers would be in perfect bloom. Some flowers would be yet to bud. Some flowers would be actually withered away, about to die, and some flowers would be actually on the ground because they had fallen off and they had died, and there was new life to be sprouted forth. And I really like that imagery because we are all in this grander organism, this continuum of life, and we are all in absolutely different stages within our process all the time. This sister can be, let's just use some names. Sydney can be in full summer, full birthing, full creation. She could be on fire with the ideas that are flowing through. And Yvette could be deep in a winter. She could be deep in the void, deep in an internal state. And they could be happening concurrently. And both are valid. Both are necessary. Both are key to our process. So just because we see someone in their full summer, in their full bloom, we actually have to know that if that's not true to us, that our process is just as important to our journey and our evolution. And when we stop comparing our states to others, we can be in true intimacy with what we're needing moment to moment, and really giving ourselves the space to dissolve, to die, to unbecome, so that we may rebirth and become again. But I believe social media is what has really given us so much visual comparison all the time that it's actually affecting our mental health. And so if we're in a death, can we actually unplug? Can we detox from technology? Can we get off social media? Can we get off Instagram? Can we be in our process and be internal? And when we're ready to come back, when we're ready to feel into the collective or be inspired or be visual, then can we come back into that space? But I think part of the process is we see all of the stimulation. We are overstimulated. We are fried from a sensory perspective. We have so much visual stimuli all the time that it's actually throwing us off internally. So a last little nugget is, if we're in a winter, can we really unplug and give ourselves that space to be in a winter, or at least limit the time that we are stimulating ourselves so we can be true to our process? Because before technology existed, we didn't know what this person on the other side of the world was doing in her summer. We were just in our process. And now we see someone in their summer and their bloom in a different country in a totally different time zone, over here. And we're like, I should be doing more. I should be creating more. Like, I have to match up to what they're doing. And it's not how we're meant to live. So that just wanted to come through for some reason. But if you're in a death, if you're in a void, really give yourself that space without all the stimuli and without all the comparisons, so you can be true to your process and truly unplug and come back when you're ready to rebirth into that next octave of yourself and your unique expression that is true to you. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, Adelina. Thank you for your medicine, for your beauty, for your wisdom. Thank you to all the sisters that shared space. I hope you received some nugget today that you can take with you and plant a seed into the new way of relating to both principles and both qualities, masculine and feminine. And I hope to see you all in some kind of shared space very soon. Sending so much love. Thank you, Adelina. Have a beautiful rest of your day or evening. Much love.